Lucas Reed had everything a teenager could dream of, yet nothing of what he truly needed. He was the only son of Charles Reed, a tech tycoon whose face often appeared on Forbes covers, and his life was built on luxury. Private jets, designer clothes, celebrity-filled birthdays. It was all normal for Lucas. He attended the most elite private high school in Atlanta, not because he earned his place, but because the Reed name was like a golden key that unlocked doors money couldn't. But beneath the polished exterior, Lucas was crumbling. His grades were abysmal, his teachers feared him more than they respected him, and his classmates saw him as either a spoiled idol or an arrogant joke. When confronted, Lucas would smirk and boast that he could buy the school if he wanted, and no one dared to correct him, not when their careers and funding depended on his father's donations. At home, things were no better. Charles Reed was a man of iron discipline, cold and unyielding, who treated failure with zero tolerance. One night, after yet another call from the school about Lucas's grades, Charles looked at his son and delivered a blow sharper than any punishment. "You're an embarrassment. If you worked for me, you'd be fired." Lucas rolled his eyes and sneered. "I'm not your employee, I'm your son." But Charles didn't flinch. "The world doesn't care, Lucas. Either you become someone or you'll just be another rich kid with no spine, and I won't carry you." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Charles meant it, and Lucas knew it. Yet the next morning, Lucas walked into school with the same smug energy, pulling into the faculty lot in his sleek Audi, strutting through the marble hallways in arrogance. He believed nothing could truly touch him, but he was wrong. Because while his classmates avoided his gaze, one pair of eyes saw through him. A pair belonging to Evelyn Wallace, the black janitor in her 50s, quiet, upright, and always overlooked, as if she was invisible. Lucas never noticed her then, but soon she would change everything. The collapse began slowly, then all at once. Lucas's report cards plummeted, with failures so sharp they could no longer be disguised. A literature test returned with a humiliating 18 out of 100, followed by math with 24%, and history barely scraping 31. Biology hit rock bottom with a bold red 0. No amount of arrogance could cover the truth. He was academically drowning. His father's patience snapped. Charles cut off Lucas's credit cards, took his Audi, and forced him to take the school bus like everyone else. For the first time, Lucas felt the sting of humiliation, walking the halls without the armor of wealth. It was during one of those mornings, bitter and raw, that he heard Evelyn whisper words while cleaning. "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." Something about it pierced through his arrogance. He stopped and asked what she had said. Calmly, without fear, Evelyn answered, "Nothing you're ready to understand, boy." Lucas laughed it off, but her words lingered like a thorn. The next day, after another failing grade, Lucas found her again near the cafeteria. This time he confronted her, half curious, half defensive. "Weird for a janitor to quote Socrates," he said. Evelyn's reply struck deep. "It's weirder when a boy with the whole world at his feet can't pass a reading test." Her words stripped him bare, exposing what he'd buried beneath arrogance. Slowly, he learned she wasn't just a janitor. She had once been a college professor, teaching English literature and philosophy until life stripped her of everything: career, stability, even her husband. Yet she carried herself with dignity, still holding the one thing life couldn't take: knowledge. Lucas, for the first time in his life, asked someone not for money, not for favors, but for help. "Teach me," he whispered. Evelyn studied him carefully before agreeing on one condition: Leave your name and your pride at the door. Start from zero, from the floor. Lucas agreed, desperate and shaken, and the unlikely journey between a billionaire's lost son and a janitor philosopher began before sunrise, in empty hallways no one cared to notice. What began as desperation grew into a rhythm, a secret pact between teacher and student. Every morning before the first bell, Lucas met Evelyn in the East Wing, notebook in hand. She taught differently than any tutor or teacher he'd ever had. She didn't lecture or spoon-feed him answers. Instead, she provoked him with questions that demanded thought, demanded vulnerability. What did this sentence make you feel? Why do you think silence carries meaning? Can you explain courage without using the word itself? At first, Lucas stumbled, frustrated that she never gave him simple answers. But slowly he began to see words differently. Books stopped being chores and started becoming mirrors. His notebook filled not with polished essays but with raw reflections about his father, about emptiness, about his hidden fear of being worthless without the Reed name. Evelyn read every page, responding not with praise but with piercing notes. Don't just say it. Mean it. This is hollow. Rewrite it with your soul. Lucas rewrote again and again. He grew used to failure, but instead of mocking it, he embraced it. And for the first time, failure didn't crush him, it built him. Still, the school wasn't kind. When classmates mocked him for spending time with the janitor, Evelyn whispered, "You don't measure depth with a shallow ruler." That one line hit harder than any insult. Meanwhile, Charles was growing impatient. Lucas received a final warning: improve or be cut off completely. But unlike before, Lucas didn't feel fear. He felt resolve. Evelyn was teaching him something his father never had, the courage to unlearn arrogance and rebuild with truth. Change was not instant, but it was undeniable. Lucas began showing up differently. His grades improved, his essays carried weight, and teachers noticed his newfound willingness to engage. But with every step forward, pressure mounted. Charles demanded to know who was helping him, and when Lucas admitted it was Evelyn, Charles laughed cruelly. "She's a janitor, that's all that matters." Lucas shot back. "She taught me more than all your overpriced tutors." The clash widened the gulf between father and son. Still, Lucas pressed on, sharing Evelyn's teachings with classmates who needed help. What started as secret morning sessions grew into small circles of students gathering in the abandoned library after school. Evelyn, with nothing but her wisdom and compassion, created an underground classroom that valued honesty over grades. Students who had been invisible found themselves heard. Quotes from Baldwin, Morrison, and Hurston were shared like lifelines. For Lucas, these weren't just lessons, they were awakenings, but the school system didn't approve. Evelyn was summoned by administrators and told to stop. Her response was calm but fierce. "Neither is saving a kid's life, but I did that anyway." They threatened her job, but Evelyn refused to bend. Lucas, enraged, offered to expose them using his father's influence, but Evelyn stopped him. "Not yet. Your voice must stand on its own, not your father's." The quiet revolution was growing, and so was Lucas's transformation. He no longer wanted grades for mercy. He wanted meaning, and that scared those who thrived on the old order. The tension reached its breaking point. Lucas earned his first true A on an essay titled "The Courage to Unlearn" with his teacher's comment, "You found your voice." For Lucas, it wasn't just a grade. It was proof that he was becoming someone new. Excited, he showed it to his father, only to be met with scorn. Charles dismissed it as a diary entry, sentimental nonsense, and demanded he stop learning from Evelyn. When Lucas refused, Charles cut him off completely. Pack your things, you're done. The next day, Evelyn was gone, fired quietly, escorted out without a chance to say goodbye. Lucas searched the halls, devastated, his fire dimmed. But when the school announced its senior speech contest with the topic what it means to win in life, Lucas saw it as his battlefield. He spent nights writing, not for grades, but for Evelyn. When the contest arrived, the auditorium was packed with parents, faculty, and scouts. Lucas stepped on stage, no longer dressed in arrogance but in plain clothes, holding nothing but his notebook. His voice carried not wealth but truth. He spoke of Evelyn, the woman who taught him more than wealth ever could, who showed him that real winning wasn't about status but transformation. She didn't just clean the floors of this school. She cleared the fog in my head. His words silenced the room, then shook it into a standing ovation. Unknown to him, Evelyn sat quietly in the back, tears in her eyes, watching the boy she saved become a man. Lucas's speech went viral. The story of the billionaire's son crediting a janitor for saving his life spread across news outlets and social media. The narrative was too powerful to ignore. A young man rejecting privilege to embrace truth, and a woman once cast aside reclaiming her rightful place as a teacher. Evelyn received invitations to speak at colleges and was eventually offered a teaching position again, not because of her resume, but because her impact could no longer be silenced. Lucas passed his classes with purpose, declined Ivy League offers, and instead chose a college dedicated to social justice and education. When asked why, his answer was simple: because I want to teach the way she taught me. He wanted to build spaces where no one was invisible, where students were seen for who they could become, not dismissed for who they were. And so, with his diploma in hand, Lucas visited Evelyn at her modest home. He handed her an envelope with his diploma, his college acceptance, and a proposal. "I want to start something," he said. "A center where people can learn like I did, with honesty and without shame. I want to call it the Evelyn Institute." Evelyn read the letter, her eyes brimming with tears. "Why me?" she asked softly. Lucas's answer was firm: "Because everything I am now started with you." That day, they promised to build it together. The Evelyn Institute opened months later in a repurposed community center. What began as an idea became a movement. Kids who had been written off came through its doors and found hope. Evelyn taught with chalk, with books, with relentless belief, and Lucas ran the programs, never ceasing to learn himself. The city took notice. Awards were given, articles were written, but the true reward was the voices of the students themselves. One 12-year-old handed Evelyn a notebook and whispered, "This place made me feel smart for the first time." She cried, and so did Lucas. Even Charles, once so cold, came quietly to the opening of the institute. He stood in the back, watching his son speak about justice and humility. Later, father and son met outside. "I didn't expect to cry," Charles admitted. Lucas's reply was soft but resolute. "I didn't expect to forgive you." They embraced, not as billionaire and heir, but as two men learning to heal. The institute grew into a symbol of second chances, of unlearned arrogance and rediscovered humanity. Years later, Lucas stood on stage once more, this time accepting a National Education Award. He looked into the crowd, holding the microphone with steady hands, and said, "They said I failed everything until I learned one truth, that greatness doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing others, and sometimes the person who saves you isn't in a suit. They're holding a mop, whispering philosophers while no one listens. Her name is Evelyn Wallace, and she didn't just save my grades." She saved my soul. The room erupted with applause, but Lucas's gaze was fixed on Evelyn, who sat in the front row, smiling with quiet pride. The boy who once thought his last name was enough had learned that a name meant nothing without purpose. And Evelyn, once invisible in the hallways, had become the spark that lit a movement. Together, they built a legacy, not of wealth, but of transformation. A legacy that proved the greatest victories aren't written in bank accounts or family names. They're written in the lives we lift, the truths we tell, and the courage to unlearn everything we thought we knew in order to finally see.